Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video you're checking out an easy DPS build for the Magicka Sorcerer class in the Elder Scrolls Online. Not only that, this is my version of an easy heavy attack build where all you need is a few skills and you don't even need trials gear to be effective. This build is also getting a massive increase in damage in the upcoming Markarth DLC. We'll talk about all of that and how it works coming up next. All right, everybody, here we are back on the Magicka Sorcerer, this time with another easy DPS build. No trials gear, easy rotation setup. We'll go ahead and jump into the buff stats here. Really, all you need is your potion. And then once you have that active, you should be looking at about 36,000 max Magicka, almost 19,000 max health, which is quite high, about 10,000 max stamina, almost 1,000 Magicka recovery, also very high. We've got great spell damage and spell critical, and this will increase, by the way, once you have your back bar glyph active. If you have any group buffs, this will go up quite a bit more. And of course, we do want 64 points into max Magicka, this being a Magicka Sorcerer build. And then in terms of the food, really anything with max Magicka, max health. I've got the Bloody Mara right now. If you're having any issues at all sustaining, or if you have less champion points, another great option is going to be Witch Mother's Potent Brew. In terms of the Mundus Stone, I think you still want to use the Shadow for the extra crit damage and crit healing. Very nice still. And our passive buffs here, Major Prophecy, Bound Aegis, Minor Force. We'll talk about how we're getting those in just a minute. That's the basics. Now, what potion do you need? Again, we talked about spell power potions. This is actually not necessary in all cases because you can run Crit Surge for the extra spell damage. You can also run Inner Light for the extra spell critical. So if you want, you can run just basic Magicka trash potions. That, of course, will be much cheaper. But if you don't want to worry about those, if you don't want to waste a cast with Crit Surge, for example, then spell power potions will help you out there. In terms of the race, I think there's still a couple of good options here. Currently, I'm using a High Elf. Now, High Elves do gain some extra resources from the spell recharge passive, which is really nice. You also have a little bit less damage taken while you're channeling. And by the way, since this is a heavy attack build, which we talked about, then you do have this bonus up quite a bit. You also get the max Magicka, of course, and the spell damage, 258 spell damage, also increases with major and minor sorcery. So that's a very strong buff. This makes High Elf probably your number one choice in terms of you want to maximize the overall damage of this setup. Of course, Dark Elf will be a pretty close second. They also have spell damage and max Magicka. In terms of their bonuses, Khajiit will be pretty strong as well due to the increased critical damage. Now, you can use a Breton if you're having issues sustaining, but like we talked about, since this is a heavy attack build, we have tons of extra sustain, so Breton will be kind of a waste on a heavy attack build. So I think that covers the basics. Let's talk about the gear sets next. Starting off with our first 5-piece set, we're going to run the Medusa set. And this did get buffed. I believe it was in the Stonethorn DLC pretty recently. This now is basically a miniature Mother Sorrow, but with minor force on top of that at all times. Now, why is this good? Well, on an easy build where you're trying to just use as few skills as possible, having that extra minor force on your character at all times without having to cast anything, it's actually quite nice. It helps to simplify the rotation quite a bit. Now, unfortunately, this still is a heavy armor dungeon set. So that means you have to be very specific about the pieces that you want in order to maximize this on a light armor setup, which we are as a Magicka Sorcerer. So probably the best way to run this, in my opinion, is going to be picking up the Lightning Staff. Now, that can take a little bit of time, so just keep that in mind. And then combining the Lightning Staff, since that does count for 2 set bonuses, with 3 pieces of jewelry. So the Medusa necklace and 2 rings. That's what I would recommend if you can. Now, if you can't get the staff, that's okay. We can actually use the staff for our other 5-piece set, and it will work equally as well. So it really depends. If you're farming both of these, whichever staff you get first might be the one that you want to use. In that case, if you don't have the Medusa Lightning Staff, then you can just simply run 2 body pieces. And remember, since that is heavy, you want to go with a heavy chest and heavy legs along with the 3 pieces of jewelry. That's the other way you can basically make a 5-piece set from this. Now, in terms of the traits, Precise did see a slight nerf, but it's still quite strong. I think 7.2% at gold is going to help get you well over 60%, close to 70% or more, depending on your group composition. So I would go with Precise. Keep in mind also that in the upcoming Markarth DLC, debuffs like Breach are actually stronger, so penetration isn't really as needed, especially for Magicka-based characters because we already have light armor penetration. So Precise on the staff, and then for the jewelry, it's kind of up to you in terms of the traits. I haven't seen huge differences either way between like Bloodthirsty and Infused, but you definitely will want to transmute this to either one of those options. Because since this is a heavy armor set, the default healthy trait, which is max health, that's really not what you want on your jewelry for a Magicka build. So, like I said, some combination of Infused and Bloodthirsty is what you want for your jewels there. And then spell damage, that's the way to go for all 3 enchants. All right, so our second 5-piece set is one of my new favorite Magicka Sorcerer sets, and I actually ran this on my solo Mag Sorc as well, and it's still a very strong set, even upcoming in the Markarth DLC, and that is called Noble Duelist. So this does give you kind of an odd stamina recovery bonus, but it gives you 2 spell damage bonuses, which is really nice. And then also when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack in melee range, you cause your light and heavy attacks to deal additional 1811 damage for 5 seconds. So yes, you will need to be fairly close to your target, I'd say 5 to 6 meters. But as long as you're close, this will be up 100% of the time, and it's a massive buff to both your light and heavy attacks, which actually synergizes with some of the other sets that we're running as well in terms of the range and the other buffs that we have. This is going to be another dungeon set. This comes from the Blessed Crucible dungeon. You can pick this up on normal if you want to just solo farm it yourself to get body pieces. That's what I would recommend here, 5 pieces on the body. Of course, you can just flip the sets completely. You can get the Noble Duelist staff, mix up the pieces that way. It really doesn't matter as long as you have 5 of each set. Now, in terms of your body pieces, whatever you have, make sure you have Max Magicka for all the enchants. Make sure you have Divines as the trait if you can. Those will be your best in slot options. Now, in terms of the Monster Helm, now remember we are going to be fairly close to the enemy, basically in melee range as much as possible. And I think a great option for that is still a Zahn Monster Helm. This gives us 1-piece spell critical bonus. And then for the 2-piece, when we do damage with a light or heavy attack, again, we're heavy attacking all the time, then you have a flame damage beam on your target. This is really nice because it can also apply like the burning status effect. Does massive, massive damage, although it does have a pretty significant cooldown. Still one of the strongest monster sets in the game. So that's what I would recommend for the Mag Sorc, again, because we are close to the target. This is going to do as much damage as possible. Since I am running 5 light on the body with a Noble Duelist, that's the light chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet. You would want to ideally run a heavy helmet if you have this set up, and then the medium shoulders. That's just going to give you the most stats possible through the Undaunted 511 passive. So 5 light pieces, 1 heavy piece, and 1 medium piece. In terms of the backbar weapon, we didn't talk about this yet. Maelstrom Inferno Staff does not have to be perfected. Remember now that normal Maelstrom Arena does drop the Maelstrom weapons, so you can farm this on normal if you want. Flame Staff is going to be ideal because you're going to get some extra bonus damage off your Wall of Fire. Combine that with the burning status effect from running Zahn. Has a pretty good uptime on burning. You're going to get some nice extra damage from having Maelstrom staff on your back bar. Also keep in mind that this effect here is very strong, especially on heavy attack builds. We already have bonus heavy attack damage from the Duelist set, and then we have the extra 1353 damage here on our heavy attacks from Crushing Wall. That's basically anytime you have Wall of Fire down on the ground, you do get that buff. Doesn't matter if you're on the back bar or the front bar. And then we even have one more sort of secret bonus to heavy attacks that we'll talk about when we get to the skills. Now, in terms of the best trait, still going to be infused for your back bar staff. That's because you do want your spell damage enchant to be as strong as possible. That's 452. And that will scale up, by the way, with major minor sorcery. So you do get quite a bit of extra spell damage from this glyph, and it's up all the time. So that's what you want, ideally. And that is the setup. So we've got Medusa, 5 pieces. We've got Noble Duelist, 5 pieces. Back bar, Maelstrom Staff, and then the Zahn Monster set. So let's talk about skills next. This is where it really starts to get interesting. Now, this is sort of the ideal way to run this. You can make this much simpler, which we'll talk about when we go over the rotation, but just ideally, these are the skills that you want to run on your front and back bar. So first up is Daedric Prey. That is from the Daedric Summoning skill line. That's going to be our second ability here. And since we are running the Flappy Flapper bird pet, this is going to give this a nice buff. This also buffs our ultimate as well. It does pretty good damage every 6 seconds. It fits nicely in a rotation, and it's very low cost. So I did see a nice DPS increase when running this. Now, speaking of those pets, our next ability is going to be the Twilight Tormentor. This is also from Daedric Summoning Magic Sorcerer class line. That's the third ability here. And the Tormentor is basically the damage morph. So the other morph, the Matriarch, is going to be for healers. This is for if you want to do damage with one basic caveat here, and that's this extra bonus effect works above 50% health. Now, I don't mean you need to be above 50% health. What I mean is your target needs to be 50% health or above to get this special extra damaging ability. So keep that in mind. On a major boss fight, we're only going to use this when the boss is above 50% health. When they're below 50% health, we'll swap this to a back bar dot. All right, third ability is a little bit unusual, and this is the secret sauce for this build. This is what makes it work. This is Volcanic Rune from the Mages Guild skill line. So that's our second to last ability. And what this does is it puts a rune on the ground. It does some basic fire damage, which is nice, but it also triggers a very useful passive. And in the Markarth DLC, this is going to get even stronger. Let me show you quickly what I'm talking about. We're talking about Might of the Guild. Casting a Mage's Guild ability grants you Empower, increasing the damage of your light and heavy attacks by 40% for 3 seconds. Now keep in mind, this has changed for the Markarth DLC. If you're watching this video right now in Stonethorn, this will only buff your light attack damage. But in a couple of weeks, they're actually changing how Empower works and making it buff heavy attacks as well. So you can see my heavy attacks will be increased by 40% for 3 seconds. That's basically the full duration of a lightning staff heavy attack, and this buffs every single tick of damage. Let me just show you what that looks like. So here's my normal heavy attack. Okay, and then I'll throw down my Volcanic Rune into a heavy attack. You see I get that Empower buff for most of the damage there. So basically weaving in Rune plus your heavy attack, you're guaranteed 40% extra damage there, just on that single ability, and it's very easy to weave into your heavy attacks. So just keep that in mind. Coming up in the Markarth DLC, Volcanic Rune combined with a heavy attack from something like a lightning staff, it's actually going to be a pretty powerful option now for a lot of builds, not just Magicka Sorcerer, so keep that in mind. Now the rest of our skills are really just passive buffs. We've got Bound Aegis from the Sorcerer class line. That's from Daedric Summoning as well. It's our last ability there. This just gives us some extra max Magicka, 8%. We also get the Minor Resolve buff, so that increases our physical and spell resistance. More Magicka is always good, so that's why that is there. We've also combined this with Inner Light from the Mages Guild skill line. That's the first ability there. Again, more Magicka is good. And this also gives you Major Prophecy passively, so you can get that spell critical bonus for free if you want to run something like basic Magicka potions. That's totally fine on this setup. And in terms of the ultimate, remember we are running another pet, and we are running Daedric Prey, which increases our pet's damage by 20%. So we want to maximize that by using the Greater Storm Atronach. That is also from Daedric Summoning. The Daedric Summoning ultimate here, either morph really is fine. The other morph gives you more AoE damage. This gives you more single target damage and a longer duration. I tend to prefer the longer duration just because by the time this wears off in about 30 seconds, I can almost have another ultimate ready at that point. It's such a long duration. This does give your group a nice synergy as well, Major Berserk, and it does some very nice damage over time, which synergizes well with the Lightning Staff on the front bar. So that's the ultimate there. In terms of the back bar, we're running Blockade of Fire. This, of course, is from the Destruction Staff skill line. It's called Elemental Blockade. With a Fire Staff, it's Blockade of Fire. And we talked about burning briefly before. So Blockade of Fire deals additional damage to burning enemies. Remember, you will have a very high burning uptime thanks to the flame damage from the Zon set. So I just felt like this was probably the best option in this case. You can also run a Lightning Staff on your back bar. Honestly, you could run an Ice Staff even. Just the main thing is we want to make sure we're keeping that ground AoE up every second, because that's what buffs our heavy attacks on the front bar. Next up, we've got Twilight Tormentor again, because we do need to double bar it, otherwise it will disappear. And I talked briefly about replacing Tormentor when your enemy dips below 50% health. Since you no longer get the bonus damage from Tormentor, you can just replace this with an extra dot. Something like Structured Entropy would be really nice. Since we're so heavily spec'd into like Thaumaturge in the champion point system, this actually does pretty decent damage, and it has a similar duration to Blockade, so it is pretty easy to keep those two dots up together. Now, in terms of the back bar, this is where you can run some extra buffs if you want. So, for example, this is where you could run Critical Surge. That comes from the Storm Calling skill line, so you can get the extra passive healing if you want to. You want to help your healers out a little bit, then definitely have Crit Surge slotted here. If not, if you have enough healing from your group, then I would just keep Aegis on for the extra max Magicka, the extra damage. Same thing with Inner Light. Totally flexible. Again, you could put something like Dampen Magic if you think you need a damage shield for a particular fight. That's a place where you could run that. But if you don't need that, Inner Light is nice for the extra max Magicka, which gives us extra damage. For the back bar ultimate, I'm just double barring Greater Storm Atronach. That's really up to you. Again, you can run something like Elemental Rage if you really want to like start off a fight that way. But remember, Greater Storm Atronach is the only ultimate that's going to be buffed by our Daedric Prey, so that's what I prefer in most cases. Okay, so basic rotation, let's talk about some options here. Now, if you just want to learn the very basic, most simplest rotation you can do, remember Volcanic Rune gives you that Empower buff, and you combine that with a heavy attack. This ability combined with your heavy, that's probably 30 to 35% of the overall damage of this build. That's how easy it is. So this is a good place to start, just weaving in those heavy attacks with Volcanic Rune. Now, once you get those timed out, you'll obviously want to combine your back bar, and there's just two abilities here. So the Pet, and then your Blockade of Fire are your two back bar abilities. So again, Pet, Blockade, then Bar Swap, Volcanic Rune, and Heavy Attack. You'll want to do that about 3 to 4 times before switching back. So there's 4. My Pet buff just wore off, so now I'll swap back. My wall wore off. There you go. So that's a very simple version of this rotation. If you just want to practice that until you get used to it, you'll still be able to do quite a lot of damage because, again, heavy attacks is where it's at. The last thing you want to practice is mixing in your Daedric Prey. So usually that lasts about 6 seconds. So the way I would do that is start on the back bar. So let me slow down a little bit. So Pet. Here's our Blockade. Daedric Prey. And do 2 of these. 2 runes and 2 heavy attacks. Let's do that again. Pet, Blockade, Daedric Prey, Rune and Heavy, Rune and Heavy. So that all fit in the 6-second duration of my Daedric Prey. Rune and Heavy, Rune and Heavy. At this point, I'm going to recast Daedric Prey, do another rune and another heavy, and redo my back bar. Like this, and restart. So Daedric Prey with 2 runes and 2 heavy attacks. Daedric Prey with 1 rune, 1 heavy attack, and your back bar dots. Now, if your ultimate is ready, of course, you'll want to add that in. That does get buffed by Daedric Prey, so keep that up as much as possible. Now let's pretend that the target is below 50%. Rotation will basically be the same, but instead of using your Pet, you're going to do Structured Entropy on the back bar instead. So like this. 2 runes with heavy attacks, basically exactly the same. So here's my last rune, heavy attack. And again, instead of Pet, go with Entropy, Blockade, and then restart. All right, so what else do you need to know? In terms of passives, Some pretty decent passives that you want to pick up on the Magicka Sorcerer. In terms of the Dark Magic skill line, the best passive here is going to be Unholy Knowledge. This gives you cost reduction of health, magicka, and stamina abilities, so very nice passive overall. Definitely pick that one up. In terms of Daedric Summoning, the best passives here, Rebate is not bad. This did get buffed recently where he gets some more max magicka back. The best one is probably Power Stone for the 15% reduced cost of ultimates. That helps us keep that Atronach up as much as possible. Then you do get some extra health and stamina recovery, which is okay. I probably would put 2 points there as well. But then Expert Summoner is actually very good also. Definitely worth some points because you get 8% max health just by having a pet active, and our Tormentor will count for that. So 8% max health is very good. Definitely want to pick that one up. In terms of the Storm Calling, 10% magicka recovery on Capacitor. This is fine. I mean, I would probably put 2 points there. The extra shock damage, though, on Energized is very good. This buffs our heavy attacks. It also buffs our shock enchant on the front bar. So definitely worth your points there. Amplitude, you do get bonus damage based on missing health. And then Expert Mage is actually very powerful the way we've set this up. 8% bonus spell damage. This is based on how many sorcerer abilities you have slotted on the front bar. So we have 4, which gives us 8% spell damage. Really nice. Destruction Staff, you will want all of your passives there, as well as your light armor passives. In the guild skill line, Mage's Guild. This is super important, you guys. This is what makes the build actually very powerful. So you will want Might of the Guild. Now this is where we talked about the extra Empower, how that's getting changed in the Markarth DLC, now buffing your heavy attacks as well as your light attacks by 40%. This is a massive buff, so you will need Mage's Guild to make this work. Of course, we also will want things like Mage Adept. That reduces the cost of Volcanic Runes, so that's actually very good for sustain. And the Magicka Controller gives us some extra bonus max magicka and recovery, so that's good as well. Undaunted, if you have this at 10, you should definitely pick up Undaunted Metal. That gives us 6% bonus health, magicka, and stamina. Assault and Support, not needed. You can ignore those. Of course, you do want your racial passives. And then Alchemy, Medicinal Use for the extra potion duration. Now, in terms of champion points, Green Tree, not a big deal. You can move these around as you need to. So 37 Warlord, 21 Sprinter, 43 in Tenacity. That's just even more sustain off heavy attacks, right? 100 into Arcanist, 34 into Shadow Ward and Tumbling. Very simple. Now, for the blue tree, this is where things have changed a little bit. So 56 into Elfborn, 49 into Elemental Defender. You do not need points into Spell Erosion. That's, of course, because Breach has gotten a pretty sizable buff. Both Major Breach and Minor Breach in the Markarth DLC, those have increased values. You do have your light armor passes for penetration as well. So what's nice for a heavy attack build is we actually save a lot of points here, and we can stick those into Staff Expert. What does Staff Expert do? Pretty obvious. It increases the damage of your light and heavy attacks, which does tons of damage on this build. 26% for 50 points. That's a pretty good bonus. So I would definitely take that. Then we got Mastered Arms, 40 points there. And then 75 into Thaumaturge. The extra 3 is just to proc Exploiter when an enemy is off balance. All your damage is increased by 10%, so it's very important. Even though this doesn't increase the damage of Thaumaturge because it's past the jump point, you do want Exploiter unlocked. For your red CP, this will depend on the encounter, but just for a basic setup, 72 into Ironclad, 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 40 Thick-Skinned, 19 Light Armor, and 27 into Quick Recovery. Now, if you're curious about the outfit style, this is actually new with the Markarth DLC as well. This is from the Reach, actually. It's Arkzand Armory, I guess it's called. It's a pretty cool mix of like a Dwemer style with more of like a mage kind of look. So I'm running that on all the body pieces, including the robe, and then running the staff as well. Pretty cool. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this easy Magicka Sorcerer DPS build for the Elder Scrolls Online. Hope you guys found this video helpful, and if you did, don't forget to crush that like button and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure you are subscribed as well for more ESO guides and builds just like this one. with those notifications turned on so you don't miss anything. Now, in the description, I'll have links to my social media as well as my brand new website. The website, by the way, has written versions of all of my builds, so if you have any questions or if you need to refer back to something later, make sure you click on the description to check out the written guide. As always, thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.